Ready when you are.
Everyone.
Okay, great. Welcome back, everybody, to the second session of our fall conference today. We're very pleased to have our friends Bennett Delosier and Henry Delosier from GGA here today talking about brand management. So we thank you for being here. As we did this morning, I will put the link to the Survey Monkey in the chat session, so you can see that. And at the very end, we'll give you the code. And I will also be monitoring questions as we did this morning on your session. So if you have questions, go ahead and put those in there. And at the end of the session, I will read the questions to Henry and Bennett to respond. So without further ado, GGA, thank you for being here.
Beth, thank you for inviting us to participate with everyone. And let me kick off by first just making everyone comfortable. No need for a lot of text messages. I'm not ill. In fact, I'm healthy as a war horse. I just decided to lose some weight since most of us saw one another in Dallas. So with that out of the way, let's jump in and talk a little bit about getting your brand right. You know, the fact of the matter is branding in private clubs is the next big thing. And Lord only knows, club managers, club leaders have so many responsibilities to look after that having one more is no surprise. But what we're seeing in our work around North America and the world is the increasing demand on brand reliability. Many of you have seen a 2020 global survey that we executed of some 6,300 plus members around the world, and club members weighing in on a number of viewpoints in the wake of the onset of the coronavirus. And one of the big takeaways from that survey was the reality that people are counting on their clubs to deliver them a certain level of reliability for services, for capabilities, and that becomes a really critical factor. One of the things that I want to emphasize in this discussion is this very first quote taken from Seth Godin, the marketing and communications guru, author of The Purple Cow, The Red Fez, many books talking about market differentiation. And it is that Seth Godin reminds us that your brand is in everything you do and fail to do. We all are alert to how we treat our members and how critical that is to our brand strength. So too is how we treat our staff, how our people react to our brand. And beyond that now is how you treat your suppliers, how your supply chain reacts to your club, what people are saying about your club at the supermarket, and right on down the line. The fact of the matter is most clubs have a very closed-in audience, and therefore any disruptions in your brand relationships ripple through the entire audience. So it becomes important that club leaders are proactive when it comes to matters of brand. And as we advance to the next slide, what I'll show you is some of the world's most famous brands. And just a very simple textbook definition of what a brand is. And for me, and I believe for most of you who are listening from the state of Florida, you know that your brand is so much more than a trademark. It is so much more than a jingle. It is so much more than witty things. It stands for who you are, and therefore it relies upon you to be and act in the manner that you say you are and will act. And I think that's one of the most important takeaways that Bennett and I hope to impart from this discussion, is that your brand is in everything you do. And as you look at these famous brands, I'm reminded years ago, I was watching Warren Buffett speaking to the students at the University of North Carolina Business School. And someone asked him, you own all this stock in Coca-Cola. Why? And he said, it's the most recognized brand on the planet. Why would I not want to own some of that? And so in your own world, in your own way, one of the challenges in most clubs is to make your club's brand the most recognizable brand. And that's a great aspiration. It's in fact a good strategic goal for you. One of the things that we so often are talking about in clubs is how can you extend your brand reach, make your club even better known, more highly recognized and highly regarded. And we'll talk about some tactics that we think might be helpful to you along those lines. What I want before we leave this slide is to emphasize you're seeing logos there that have become 21st century in terms of their iconic impact. And at the same time, we're dealing in such an evolving time and an evolving market that the certainty of these brands comes down to the quality of the leadership behind each of those brands. That's you. So as we think about jumping forward, then on the next slide, I want to call out one of the brands that all of us know, and one of the gentlemen we all so admire up at Augusta National Golf Club, our friend Jim James, who's made this statement very simply, that we want to try to be sure that our strategy is articulated in all of the things that we're doing. We want to be sure that we can be the best in all of the things that we do. That is essentially the brand standard for Jim's club. And admirable, aspirational, the real key here and the real point that I'm wanting to make is you'll need to decide what your brand strategy is. You'll need to decide what the reach of your brand will be for the benefit of your club. So as we then advance beyond that, I want to toss out some ideas for you to think about as we jump into the 7 steps that we think drive branding success. And so with that said, Bennett, if you don't mind, I'll jump ahead to the first of those steps. For us, this business of vision is important. And most in our work in strategic planning, most clubs really struggle around the idea of describing their vision. What is it you're trying to be? What is the aspirational value of your club? What is it supposed to mean to people? And to me, that's the roadmap that drives everything else. If you're not following that visionary path, then it's easy to lose your way. What was it Yogi Berra said so many years ago? If you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get there. That's a truth that we all have to reckon with. And one of the difficulties in most clubs is people come along and challenge your vision year to year. You get new board members. You turn over a board in 3-4 years at the most, and you have to start all over again. And the constant in that brand vision is you, the manager, the person who's leading the club. You're the person who sets the tone for so many of those board orientation discussions, for so many of those new board members, that it's important that you are alert to the fact that you need to drive your brand and you need to guide its vision. Because as we all know, the vision can get hijacked. A club manager up in Chicago some years ago said to me, you guys need to pay attention. They're going to strip the ball from you and take it the other way. And I thought that was as memorable a way of describing as anything. These guys are going to take the vision that we've all agreed upon and go somewhere else with it. And so I offer you that same reminder. Don't let someone strip your brand vision away from you. As we advance then into the next slide, I think that there are some vision statements that we toss out as examples. Obviously, we've removed the names of those clubs. The point here is not who said what, but it's to give you some examples, some reference points, so that as you think about your own vision statement for your club, that you're keeping it fresh, that you're making it bold, that you're making it relevant to your members, and candidly, that you're saying it to your members and your team so that they are reminded of what are we supposed to be? Who are we? That's an important thing. And in these uncertain times that we're experiencing right now, it's even more important that you're able to communicate what the vision is for your club. You're describing your brand. And then moving forward from that slide, I want to encourage all of you to think big. And the example that I chose to share with you is this, the image of Google. But when Sergey Brin and Larry Page launched Google, there was already a Google. It was a mathematical term, GOOGOL, which is the number 1 with 100 zeros after it. And Page and Brin wanted a company with infinite possibilities. So they were thinking big. They were thinking beyond, we want to become keepers of information. We want to be the people who think so big that we find new solutions and new methods to problems that have not yet emerged. I was reminded of that story about Google and the formation and the boldness of their vision. One day driving down State Route 101 in California, as I'm driving down the freeway, and past me goes a Google car with no driver. Pretty weird. But the folks at Google had determined, we've got to find solutions. Car crashes are killing far too many people. We have to be the guys who bring forward solutions. And so they did. So creating a vision for your brand that is infinite or big or bold is important. Many of you know the famous quote attributed to James Collins in his book, Built to Last, which was the notion of a big, hairy, audacious goal. Think big. Use your own BHAGs and drive your own club and your own people and yourself to achieve even bigger things. Bennett, I think the next slide then takes us to some ideas that I'd like everyone to be thinking about as we dig in there.
Absolutely, Henry. And I love that example you give about Google and having a big, hairy, audacious goal and thinking big for the vision of the brand. And even though we began the session here with the most recognizable logos in the world, consistently so, I think it's really important to clarify for everyone that a brand is much more than the logo. The logo's the calling card. A brand is all the intangibles. So it's the memories, it's the stories, it's the expectations, it's the relationships, which when they're all taken together and bopping around inside a person's head, that's going to account for their decision to choose one company or one club or one organization over another. And because of that, the brand isn't defined necessarily by what the organization's doing as much as it's defined by people's perceptions of the organization. And I think that's particularly important when we start talking about who are we targeting? What's the audience for our brand? And if a brand is the sum total of those expectations, experiences, memories, stories, and relationships that people have, what does that mean for club operators? And I think what that means is that when we're talking about brand value is essentially the margin between what are people willing to pay more for? What are they willing to shell out money for? If the average market price is this for dues, for full membership dues, and people are willing to pay more somewhere else, the brand value is that margin of difference. And that's significant because when we think about an airline, what's causing one person to pay a higher premium fare to fly San Francisco to the Heathrow? It's because they recognize the brand of the airline. They recognize the quality that conveys, the service, the boarding experience, the reliability, the, insurance against travel hiccups. And the challenge for any brands, and particularly for clubs, especially with the age bands we're dealing with, is that those are all value driven, and values change significantly from generation to generation, and even from person to person, and certainly location to location. And as you see on the slide here, private clubs are changing, regenerating, and growing. As always, managers are in the position to be pulling in dues, to be selling memberships. They're balancing aging members with attracting younger members. Sometimes their values conflict in what they need to do. And it's important to know your audience when you're talking about branding. And it's not enough to just say our audience is golfers in Florida or golfers in Arizona or golfers in Dallas. The audience is also defined by the types of amenities that a club offers, right? So if the club's focus is competitive golf, then the audience is low handicap golfers. Because it's not just golf. What type of golf? It's competitive golf. Who plays competitive golf? Low handicap golfers. And who plays competitive golf with others? Low handicap golfers. If your club is family friendly, the target audience expands to include messaging and positioning that communicates that the whole family matters, that there's activities for children, that children and incorporating them into the club community are an important part of the identity and values of our club. And what the messaging means, what that means for messaging is that messaging has to contain information and brand positioning that is resonant with women and children, as well as the head of the house, the male, the person working most of the time, whether that's male or female, messages have to resonate in both directions there. So we talked about your audience being defined by the type of club that you are. It's also further defined by the types of amenities that are offered. And fine-tuned messages is exactly what I was kind of getting at there with that emphasis on family or competitive golf. So logistical factors like the type of club, the amenities that are listed, and certainly the price point can certainly be a factor. But when we look down at the bottom there and it says spoken in a language to which they can relate, they being current or prospective members, what we're getting at here is psychographic factors. And psychographics are a qualitative methodology that's used to determine and describe consumer attitudes on a variety of different topics, but they're characterized by psychological attributes. So a simpler way to say it is buyer motivations, why people join the club, what makes the club special to them. And in our work with club clients, we spend a great deal of time helping clients understand their audience. We conduct a very detailed market analysis as an important component to almost every single engagement that we do. We conduct focus groups, we conduct member surveys, pulse surveys, attitudinal surveys. We conduct listening sessions and town hall sessions. And for us, when we go in to do these things, it's as much about listening as it is about telling, if not more so. What we're listening to hear is all of those things we talked about, why you joined the club, what makes it important to you, what caused you to choose this one over that one, because those are getting into those psychographic factors that are psychological attributes that kind of zooming back out to where I was speaking about before, which is those are the reasons people would pay more for one experience than another. That's why they would choose one club over the other club that they might have been considering in a similar area. And in markets like Florida, that's extremely significant because those are such heavily competitive marketplaces. And Henry, I think when we're talking about marketplaces, and I don't want to use the word saturation, but the prevalence of clubs therein, positioning really matters, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The fact of the matter is, when you think about how the club positions itself, it integrates all of the things you just mentioned. It integrates all of the things you just listened to. And by the way, I was going to add to your point about listening sessions. More and more for all of you, we're getting away from using the term focus groups wherever we can, because it seems as though in this day and time, members hear the words focus group and they think that's code for gripe session. And so we're finding by using the concept of listening sessions that they understand that we're there to listen. We're not there to supposedly lecture them on how the club should function. And that may be something for all of you to take away from this conversation as well. If you're thinking about your unique position, and Lord only knows you should be, then these are the kinds of questions you have to be answering for yourself. And you need to be specific. It is not enough to develop a brand around broad generalizations. You need to know the description of who the people are you're trying to reach. You need to understand with whom you're competing. We were working with a club recently where, when we asked the question of the board, members, what other clubs do you compete with? And they said, well, there aren't any others. We're the only one. And of course, just at a 20,000 foot level, our team was looking at the market and seeing sprinkled around a number of very similar clubs. Our friend Linda Dillenbeck, who handles a lot of our company's club communications practice, refers to what she sees when she's doing website evaluations and analyses as a sea of sameness, where people are using the same words, they're repeating the same phrases, they're trying to go to the same attributes, and that's a mistake. So you need to be sure that your club stands out, that you have clearly differentiated it from others. And then the final point on that page is an important one that probably needs no repetition because all of you are savvy enough to know this already, but you have to deliver on your promise. You have to be what you say you are. So to me, that's a real key. And I thought we might talk about some of the examples of how you go about addressing some of these issues. We put a lot of time and effort into third-party reviews. Most clubs have made their bones in the baby boomer generation. Those were the folks that created your club, started your club. They're still some of the people who heavily populate our clubs. And at the same time, if you're looking to the future, if you're looking over the horizon line, you're thinking about what's in our future. And the rising generations, millennials, Gen X, Gen Y, they pay a lot of attention to third-party reviews. So if you're on your A game, you're paying attention to third-party reviews. What are people out there saying about you? That matters. And then, of course, the other component that we want to emphasize for you is to find the right words, find different words. One of my favorite sarcastic remarks is to listen on the news or listening to interviews where the interviewee keeps saying how excited they are. I'm so excited. I'm really excited. This is exciting. And at a certain point, you got to find some new words. You can't just be excited all the time. And when you're describing your club, think about the words you use. Ask your members what words they use. One of the most common things we do in listening sessions is ask participants to tell us, what words do you use to describe this club? You learn some good words. You learn sometimes words that you didn't expect. And of course, you hear a lot of the same old cliches to which Linda refers when she refers to the sea of sameness. If you're going to develop your brand successfully, you're going to develop a unique position. That's the real key takeaway. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide, Bennett, and let you take it away. You might be muted, Bennett.
I knew I was sounding good. I was in the process of saying that when it comes to communicating brand positioning and brand messaging, it's, again, not just the logo. It's not just marketing. So it's not just the messages that are being pushed out in the newsletter. It's not what's on the notice board at the club or the TV screens in the clubhouse. It's not the social media feed. It's not flyers or things like that. But what encompasses those things is consistency. And consistency is important because consistency translates to reliability, which translates to trust. There's certain basic factors that go into that, like is everything consistent? Is your marketing consistent? And the other element to that is, are your people consistent? Are your people telling the same story of your club, the same values of your brand as its leaders? And where I think that kind of comes through is the two parts that I just mentioned, right? So brand logo, colors, message, and materials should have the same thing in everything that's produced and provided by the club, not just to current members, but to prospective members as well. The second point was, of course, do you and your staff tell the same story? Are the promises that are made to members the same? Are the actions directed to work to build the same reputation? So being consistent in what you do includes consistent messaging, which is written, verbal, and most importantly, displayed through actions. And Henry, you mentioned on that previous section the extent to which we take in customer reviews, third-party reviews, online reviews, along the lines of Yelp, TripAdvisor, online golf community ratings, and things like that. We mentioned Seth Godin at the beginning of the presentation, and along the lines of about half sarcastic comments, he has another quote, which I always like, which is, "The worst voice of the brand is the brand." And it's halfway sarcastic because it's not meant to imply that the brand should not be branding itself, should not be making itself known. But I think it's keying in on the reality that as consumers, especially in 2020, if no other time than now, we will ignore what brands say about themselves. And that's connected to trustworthiness. I read a recent study where people were asking users who highly rate TripAdvisor reviews and consider them to be trustworthy, why they consider them to be trustworthy. And over 90% of the respondents in this study indicated one of three things. The opinions are real or unbiased. They like the idea of knowing that the experience being reported is firsthand experience. And the third thing is the volume of comments. So if you've got 5 ratings or 5 reviews, 5 third-party reviews, and they're all excellent, as a consumer, it's like, okay, but shouldn't there be more for a club that's been around for almost 100 years now? And the point of that is that when we see messaging, and certainly when we see branding, which is, again, more than messaging, when we affiliate that with a brand, it modifies our perception and our opinion because we perceive it as, in a way, self-interest. Of course, you're telling me, I'll use an example in California. There's a proposition on the ballot right now that's related to, are Uber and Lyft drivers going to be mandated as full employees, or are they going to continue to be contractors? You go to use the Uber application on your phone, and there's all this encouragement to vote no against Prop 22. Drivers support Prop 22. And without even looking up what Prop 22 is, the immediate thought is, oh, okay, Uber has some self-interest in preventing Prop 22 from getting passed. So when there's an affiliation with a brand, that affects our perceptions of it because we perceive that there's self-interest. However, if we can balance what the organization or what the company is saying with what, quote, regular people are saying, and if they're sharing positive experiences with the club or being at the club or their family members who belong there or visiting there for Mother's Day brunch or Easter Sunday, that builds the brand. And so when we're thinking about reviews, it's a double-edged sword in that people are going to say what they're going to say regardless if it's true, false, or completely fabricated. And at the same time, as consumers, if we're all being honest, we look at things like that. And that's important because we determine brand value, again, not just on logo elements, not just on headers and footers and color palettes and precise imaging in the precise location, supplemented by marketing analytics. Again, when we're talking about brands, we're talking about stories, memories, expectations, emotions, and relationships. So when people are sharing their experiences and there's a consistent theme of, wow, it just seems like whoever talks about XYZ Country Club always just comes away with something along the line of, well, they've just really done that right. They just get the little things right. They make you feel like it's a second home for you, or like you're a part of the family. And I was just a guest with a member. People are going to start taking that on, and your brand is going to start being known as the values that people are communicating about it. So third-party reviews are important, and it's not necessarily important for the ratings, but it's important because it's conveying brand themes. And on that topic of brand themes, one of the other keys that we like to put forward is that telling stories is an essential part of effective brand management. Telling stories matters because members' stories make their experiences real and relatable. For all the reasons that I just mentioned, firsthand experience, volume of comments, it's not coming from the club itself. And as with any story, stories attract people to them. One of the things that I wanted to do here is look at kind of a side-by-side comparison on two different approaches of how a club, and for our audience here of club managers, might go about telling their club story. Certainly the best counter argument to what I'm putting forward is, yeah, but when you're an individual just going on vacation somewhere or going out to a club, it's a lot easier to share your story than when you're he or she who's operating the club and overseeing it. So the first example is something that we see when we're studying marketing materials and club websites for our clients. And this is, again, fictitious. It's kind of a catch-all type of approach. And somewhere either on the first page or on the about page or in the club history page, there's something to this effect. Established in 19 whatever, XYZ Country Club is regarded as one of the most prestigious, challenging, enjoyable member-owned golf clubs and continues to cultivate its place in history as a championship golf facility. First blush, going down the list of all the things that we need to be sure we get into our about us, about our history. We got to get it into a sentence if we can. We don't want to be going on an essay here. And at the same time, that story, that brand story for that club is consistent across so many clubs. We've worked in several markets where we've had the unfortunate experience of bringing our brand analysis forward and indicating it is true for your club. It isn't poor for your club. The problem is all the other clubs in the area are essentially saying the same thing. So if you're a consumer, I'm looking at 6 or 7 different clubs. I go to these different websites, similar color palettes, similar about us, similar amenities, and similar values being communicated. This makes the consumer relationship very transactional. And again, as Henry was saying at the beginning, club brands are not transactional, they're emotional. And one of the examples of how this can be evolved and adapted to speak to brand values, to speak to brand positioning and the piece of real estate that you own in the mind of your members and prospective members is something a little bit more like this. In 19XX, a group of 9 businessmen set out to create a golf club that not only respected the traditions of the game, but those of its members and staff. Over a century later, XYZ Country Club remains true to that vision. Our location, just minutes from downtown, is a sanctuary to enjoy golf. And you see underlined there some more of the key elements that are making that brand stand apart. Course designed to make you stop and think before each swing. A chef who's passionate about serving great meals, swimming in a pool that's set to the right temperature, more than the amenities, time spent with others who love the game and lifestyle as much as you do. It's saying the exact same thing as what this says on the previous slide, but the way that it's being said is in a story. You're communicating to your target audience. Imagine yourself in these shoes. This is what it's like to be a member. These are all things that we believe in. We believe in getting the details right. That's why the pool's set to the right temperature. We believe in family and gathering around food. That's why our chef is described as passionate. We believe in a challenge in a competitive environment in our sports and athletics and recreational activities. That's why on the course you have to stop and think before you take a swing. If we broke this down into component parts, we're still getting the same things as we were on that slide. Challenging, golf clubs, place in history, championship golf facility. And at the same time, when we understand club brands as a story, stories are significant. And if for no other reason, stories are significant because people love stories. And as a club and as a club manager, storytelling allows you to better illustrate why you exist and what separates you from your competition. When Henry was speaking about the vision statement, he referenced the importance of having a big vision statement, a big goal. And part of that is storytelling is going to help convey that goal in a way that isn't just self-interest. We're trying to get people to do something. We're Uber. We want people to vote no on this proposition that's not going to work for us, because modern consumers find that very transparent in a negative way. Stories provide people a way to be drawn into the story and make them want to become a part of it. Again, that second story image, or sorry, that second story slide is predicated on the notion of picture yourself here. Picture yourself doing these things. And in terms of brands, that's building loyalty. Because ultimately, building loyalty makes the brand, and the concept of what a brand is, I like to think of it as a decision shortcut. Well, I already know this brand. I already know that everyone likes their experiences there. I already know that it kind of ticks off all these boxes. So if I'm going to travel to play golf, I'm going to try to travel to go play golf here. I like this club, or I would recommend this club because I'm aware of it. And that's significant, I think. When we think about the relationship between reliability and trust, and how being consistent in what you do, and how being consistent in your storytelling between staff and members, between management and staff, board and members, management to the board, it's important to keep in mind that the consistency breeds familiarity, and it can't be left at, oh, I'm familiar with your brand. Again, in 2020, with the emphasis on digital and social channels, people need to not only be familiar, but see on display the actions that are conveying your club's brand values, which in themselves are stories. One of the things that we mentioned earlier is that as part of our client assignments, we do focus groups, listening sessions, and a whole host of different types of surveys. And as club managers, it's not go do all those yourself. It's more be sure that as much as you're positioning the club, communicating the club's history and its brand values, that you're interacting and engaging with members through things like informal discussions, fireside chats, coffee with the GM, listening sessions, and quick surveys. I know a lot of comment boxes are still in circulation. I know a lot of those have gone digital or through a club mobile application as well. A lot of these things happen on social media, especially with disgruntled people. It always seems that the happy people come by to give you a compliment face to face when it's just you and another person. And it seems that the disgruntled people always seem to, rally the Twitter flag and go out after you that way. But social media matters because people are going to say what they're going to say. And it's an opportunity for the club as a brand to display the brand's values. So even if somebody really drags the club over the rocks went there on Mother's Day and it took us forever to get our deviled eggs, it's an opportunity to say, thanks so much for the feedback. We're so sorry to hear about your experience. This is something that's really important to us, and we know how important mothers are, and we hope that we didn't take time out of your day, or something to that effect. So you've taken a criticism, and by displaying your brand values through engagement, that people walk away from that going, okay, I get that. Restaurants take time. Sometimes they take longer than expected, especially on a holiday. Everyone gets that. They're just disgruntled about it. And if you give them something to be positive about, to be encouraged about, and something that's going to convey the standards with which your club operates, that's going to matter. And engagement matters in that capacity. Henry, you mentioned earlier, ultimately it all comes down to actions. I think we, in our kind of last step to branding success here, that's one of the keys that we drive home. And I think I'll flip it to you for that.
Great. And you know, everyone who knows me knows how much stock I put in storytelling. Right? Everyone knows that before there was a written history of the world, it was passed on from generation to generation through stories. Stories of conflict, stories of accomplishments, emotional stories that tug at people's feelings. Well, this is one of the most important things, and that is your brand has to be true. Your brand has to be believable. And your brand is tested continuously in this day and time. And as Bennett mentioned, with social media and all the different means by which people can communicate, the real key, if you're going to be genuine to your brand, is to own it, for better and for worse. If something goes wrong, if there's something that's out of order at your club and someone calls you on it, own it. Be the party that can say, thanks very much, sorry that happened, we'll fix that for you. And I can't leave this point without emphasizing the experience I had at a club in California. I was with the club manager who said, hey, come with me, we've got to do the Employee of the Month award. And I went, and the staff was gathered. At that particular club, the Employee of the Month award is called the Ron Burgundy Award. And the entire award comes down to, there's a cutout of Will Ferrell in his Ron Burgundy outfit, and the manager and the employee selected by his coworkers is called out. The day I happened to be there, it was a male, a cook. And as his name was announced, and he, you know, his friends were calling out his name and wishing him forward, he began to weep. And when he kind of collected himself, he said, I told my children, I want to win this award, because to earn the respect of your coworkers is everything. Now, don't you wish that guy worked for you? Don't you wish you could be telling that story to your team? That's how you perpetuate your brand. That's how you tell your members how much your team, how much your staff cares about doing a great job for them. So as we move towards wrapping up in this discussion today, remember that your club is an emotional place. It is not a transactional arrangement. Your relationship with your members is emotional. Your relationship with your employees is emotional. And you want to hold on to that. You want to honor that in every way that you can. Bennett, if you don't mind advancing us to the next slide, I'll just emphasize several key points that go into delivering on your promise. And that's a never-ending proposition. You're never finished delivering on your promise. It's never delivered. You're always working on the next delivery. I guess that's what it must be like to be Amazon, because you're always working towards the next responsibility that you have. And Lord only knows, any of us who've been in this business get that. You have to deliver on your promises. And you have to make promises. I know I'm always dubious of people who are unwilling to make a promise, who are unwilling to make a commitment. We'll deliver this to you at such and such time on such and such day. We want to count on that. And you want them to come through on what they promised you. So Bennett, if you don't mind advancing us again, let's think a little bit about what kind of keys we should be carrying forward for everyone.
Absolutely, Henry. And just to add on before we advance, I think, you know, here we are talking about knowing your audience, being consistent in messaging, throwing out terms like brand loyalty. What I love about this deliver on your promise and only actions matter part is that brands as an organization do not inspire loyalty. People do. And for clubs, more so than other businesses, people who work in clubs are in a really, really good position to inspire loyalty along those emotional lines that you were referencing, Henry. And just not going to run through everything anew here, but just wanted to kind of lay out what we at GGA Partners believe are the 7 steps to branding success. Starts with the vision, have to know who you're talking to. Market differentiation is key. So understand what your unique position is, and I promise you there is one. Be consistent and in positioning your brand to those target audience segments, the best way to do that is by telling stories that convey the emotional and tangible aspects, the memories and the relationships, in order to kind of cultivate that and build on that, build trust, credibility, and familiarity through engagement, using opportunities to do two-way communication, digital or otherwise, with the people who are engaging with your brand, because that's another exercise in branding, because again, branding is everything you do and fail to do. And again, what we just ran through is follow through, do what you say you're going to do, be impeccable with your word. And we kind of rolled those up into what we're going to call 3 key takeaways. If there's only 3 things you take out of this today and turn over in your mind, these would be them. Know why you exist and know who you are as a club. Be clear and concise and consistent when communicating the benefits of membership at your club. And when I say communicating the benefits, that's not selling to a prospect who's there for a club tour. That's everything that you're doing. That's how staff are treated. That's how people are talking about it on social media. That's all the little touches in the dining room. And to us, the very most important thing is deliver on what you promise. And I know we promised Beth we'd leave about 10 to 15 minutes for some Q&A, and I think I did see some questions or 2 coming through in the chat, and we might have Beth read some of those out to us.
Great. Thank you, Bennett and Henry. A couple of questions. You talk about emotion and how emotion is your brand, and it's not the intangibles. It is the intangible. It's not the bricks and mortar. What role does video play in that branding message, and are there any pitfalls?
Great question. A couple points on that. It is the intangibles, because it's easier to love a brand when you feel like the brand loves you back. Second, video is absolutely significant for 2 reasons. Everyone knows the saying, picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, how much is a video worth? And all the intangibles that go into a video. I say this in a very bizarre way, and I'm sorry it's going to come across this way. One of the things I enjoyed seeing most in late February, March, April, early May lockdown quarantine mode was the number of clubs, and specifically general managers, posting videos of themselves on LinkedIn that are clearly filmed on an iPhone. They're outside, they've got their jacket on, they're dialed in. It's outside the clubhouse, the sun's kind of in their eyes, the wind's blowing their tie a little bit. And if it were a professional shoot, somebody would be all in a dither saying, no, this isn't right. And at the same time, how perfect is it that this is real, right? This happened this morning. I'm out front of my facility. I'm doing the best I can with what I've got. And the most important point of doing this is being seen by all of you and speaking directly to all of you. No matter how good of a writer you are, it's hard to write that. It's really hard to write that in. I think the use of video for the second reason is algorithm-based reasons. We're not going to get into that here today, fortunately. When LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook's determining where things are going to appear in a social feed, video is, just dominant. It's video, pictures, links, and then text. If you're just plain text, it really can get buried. The only thing to be wary about with video is consent of parties. Fortunately, I think most club members are good people, and they're not going to cause a stink about that. But where it really does matter is when, oh, check out this great shot. We'll do a wide pan of the, children's summer camp or daycare thing. That's when you really need to watch. You need to think about, okay, who's in this video? Are they willing to be in this video, and is it appropriate? And I don't think it's necessarily a legal compliance thing. I think it's more just people would appreciate the heads up that this was going to be done, so that they could say, hey, I'd rather you not. So the pitfall for video, I think, is it is just who's going to be in it and do they know they're going to be in it. That would be the pitfall I would call out.
Great.
And, you know, Beth, I'll just add to it. The best use of video I've seen lately in a club was the one up in Pennsylvania. You know, we all do, during the holidays, we all do the little gingerbread house, and the kids put candies on them and decorate them and so forth. At that particular club, they made a video of each child explaining his or her gingerbread house. I put peppermints on the door because Grandma loves peppermints, and we always like it when Grandma's knocking on the door. And I put licorice on the roof because Grandpa always eats all the licorice because nobody else wants it. And it was the cutest little story told by a little guy, you know, couldn't have been 5 years old, but there was a lot of wisdom and a lot of heart in that little house of his.
Great, thank you for that, Henry. It seems like it's a never-ending process with branding. You're never starting, you're never stopping. And how do you keep yourself on track? And Kevin Carroll just asked a great question about how do you get your board on the same page with what the brand is and stick to it and what they want it to be. So how do you get started? How do you keep it going? And who should be in charge of the consistency is, I guess, the second part of that question.
You want to take that one, Bennett? Or you want
Sure,
me to?
I'll jump at it, Henry, and
Okay.
if I miss anything, you can jump in, or you can you know, rebuttal. Kevin, really good question. And as a manager, that's particularly difficult. We've sat in those boardrooms where I don't want to call it dissonance, but difference of opinion, even if it's not being stated, surfaces. And okay, I'm the manager, sure. We want to think that our club's brand is the most family friendly and child friendly facility in the market. The question I find helpful, not only for this, but anytime you're in a, I guess, disagreement of opinion with someone, is rather than focusing on why questions, why would we position our brand that way? Why is that even true to who we are? You're never going to win. The question how starts putting on display what's possible and what isn't. So, okay, how are we currently positioning ourselves as family friendly? And if there's no answer, it's pretty much self-answered. If there's, well, you know, one of the things I really want to focus on in my term as a board member is I want to be sure that we really look down this route of child care and child minding with coronavirus and social distancing. I think it's really important. We should be looking at virtual programs for children whose parents are working at home and they're working at home too, and you're trying to be in front of the laptop and tending to a toddler at the same time. I think we should also focus on expanding our junior golf program. Now you're into, okay, so if we have this aspirational vision of we want to be this type of club, and you ask the question, how are we currently doing that and how could we do that? You're talking more what's possible rather than a values-based discussion on why we should or should not do that, and frankly, why it's important or why is it not important, because those are just going to ultimately be disagreements of opinion. So I would say that asking the how question translates it into more of a specific conversation for, okay, our goal's here, how are we going to get there, rather than why is that our goal, or why do you think it would be that? So that would be my 2 cents on that. And Henry, what about you?
Solid tactical answer. And to me, the only thing I'd add to it is if you have a communications director, ask him or her to execute an annual brand audit. If most of us who've come up in club management are not communications experts, we're not brand experts. So if you don't have a communications expert on your staff, then find an independent third party that can come in and candidly evaluate your brand, audit it, as I call it, so that you have a clear-eyed understanding of where are we strong, where are we weak, what do we need to do, and how do we leverage our assets to the greatest value.
Great, thank you for that. Just a follow-up question to that. Are there companies out there, or can you suggest somebody who understands the the club market understands our space and are good at performing those audits?
Yes, there are, and candidly, neither Bennett nor I are here today to try to hype GGA. We've run across this so much, we've actually created our own internal communications practice, because so many of our clients receive this kind of guidance from us and then say, wow, this is great. Okay, so what do I do? And we determined that if we're going to keep our brand promise, we need to be able to say, we'll take care of this for you. But there are a number of really good companies that can help you manage communications. Out in California, there's Pipeline. That my friend Steve Graves at Creative Golf Marketing can help out. There are a number of people that are attached to the private club industry who can help you. You just need to call on them. And my advice is talk to all of them so that you can hear what their ideas are and see which ones best click with you and your club.
Great. Two quick questions, Henry. We know that you're a big reader. What books are out there right now and materials that are best for sending you in the right direction on branding?
Well, I'm a little bit outdated, I believe, in my reading on brand, because I still rely on these guys who've been at it now for 20 years or so. And so I have a tendency, as evidenced in that first screen on Godin and some of the others. However, there's a lot of brand information coming now out of Harvard Business Review. And that's a great resource. The folks at Stanford have some great resources that are independent and to a certain extent academic, and those are good reference points for you as well. I don't know, Bennett, anyone that you would add to that?
In terms of authors, you've heard us reference Seth Godin a couple of times. He's author, entrepreneur, businessman, former .com executive. He was inducted into the American Marketing Association Hall of Fame, I think 2 years ago. It's one of those where you pick a book, they're all going to be really good. Between the two of us, we've read most of them. One of the kind of maybe off the beaten path ones that I would recommend, and club managers might really enjoy this because of the recreational connection, is a book called Let My People Go Surfing. And it's a book about, I can't remember if it's on an autobiography, but it's biographical about Yvon Chouinard, who's the CEO of Patagonia, as in the outdoor recreational equipment supplier, and the genesis of that company. And it's fascinating for a couple of reasons. The first being that Patagonia started building belay pins because they were more technical and more suited towards climbing in California than in the French Alps or the Swiss Alps. So it began as, we're making belaying pins, and that evolved into how can we export or import scrap from different parts of the world to get the materials we need at a good price. But what's interesting about it from a brand perspective, the Let My People Go Surfing component is one of Patagonia's brand values, which is, hey, it's supposed to snow 4 feet this weekend in the mountains, so you guys should all be off on Friday. That's how they treat their employees. And it's interesting in 2020 to look at Patagonia and where they came from, because talk about a clothing and equipment brand that has effectively become a political action organization, and not just in what they say, but in sustainability, environmentalism, climate change, and this year certainly on civil and social issues. They've become a massive corporation that, from when it started in a garage somewhere, has maintained its social and ethical values along the way. And so that one's a bit more of a fun read because you get all the great climbing stories and athletic stories. So I'd recommend that one. But for any of the more kind of theoretical branding books, I would say Seth Godin.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Not seeing any other questions in our chat, and we're coming right up on 3:01 on my clock here. We will go ahead and end the session for today. We thank Bennett and Henry always for everything. They're so generous with their time and their knowledge with the Florida chapter. So we thank you again for that. Keep in mind that Henry will be back next week, and it'll be a general session where you can ask questions across any lines, and we'll be putting out some details here in the next couple of days on the subject topics for that. So look for that to come along. And in the chat, I've also been putting the link to this session, and I got real creative on the password for this, and it's GGA. So password for this session is GGA. We wish you guys all a good day. Henry, Bennett, thank you as always, and we will see you next Wednesday for day 3 of the fall conference. So goodbye, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you, Beth. It was our pleasure.
Thank you so much.